All right, you ready for this? We're going to dive into the world of Bitcoin, but not the usual stuff. We're going deeper, way deeper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Think like global money, government strategies, even a little bit of geopolitics. Sound good.
Absolutely. What's fascinating to me is how Bitcoin's becoming like intertwined with, traditional finance and global power dynamics. It's not just a tech thing anymore.
No, not at all. So let's jump right in, okay? Everyone's talking about these crazy Bitcoin price swings. I mean, plunging down to 78,000 one minute, then shooting back up the next. It's a wild ride.
It is. It feels like a roller coaster sometimes. But I think when you zoom out, past the daily ups and downs, those swings actually tell a different story.
Oh, okay.
There are indicators, like the top and bottom indicator.
Top and bottom.
Yeah, that suggests we're not in like overheated territory yet.
So explain that. Top and bottom. What does that even mean?
Well, it's like imagine a gauge that tracks where Bitcoin's price is, relative to its all-time highs and lows. This indicator, it looks for signals that the market's getting too hot or too cold. And right now, it's telling us we're nowhere near the peak of this cycle.
Interesting. So where are we then?
We're in what's called the orange stage.
Orange stage, huh? Things about to get juicy.
You could say that. Historically, Bitcoin's biggest surges have come after hitting this orange stage.
Okay, so that's like a good thing.
It's like the pre-show before the main event. And then you've got another model, the Bitcoin mean reversion model. It's flashing a huge buy signal right now.
Wow.
Basically, it tracks how far Bitcoin's price has strayed from its average. And right now, it's basically saying, bargain.
Okay, so maybe those dips aren't so scary after all.
Maybe not. Maybe they're opportunities. But here's where it gets even more interesting. There's this massive force at play that could supercharge Bitcoin's rise. Global liquidity. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Okay, hold on. Break that down. What is global liquidity? And why should I care?
Think of it as the amount of money flowing through the global economy. When there's more money sloshing around, it tends to find its way into assets, right? Stocks, real estate, and yes, Bitcoin. More money, more potential buyers, prices go up, and right now, global liquidity is surging.
How much are we talking about? Is this like a little trickle, or is it like fire hose levels of money?
Fire hose levels. Global liquidity's increased by 5% since the beginning of the year. Now, that might not sound like much, but remember, that's all the money circulating in the entire global economy.
Yeah, that's massive.
It's a mind-boggling sum.
Okay, but does that mean Bitcoin's guaranteed to, skyrocket? Couldn't that money flow into other things, too?
Of course, nothing's guaranteed in investing, but historically, there's a pretty strong correlation between global liquidity increases and rising prices for risk assets, including Bitcoin. It's like a tide that lifts all boats.
Okay, so are we saying Bitcoin's about to take off?
Well, there's usually a lag, about 10 weeks historically, between a surge in global liquidity and a Bitcoin price response. And guess what? We're getting close to that 10-week mark right now.
Okay, so mark your calendars, everyone. Around March 25th, things could get pretty interesting. But where is all this liquidity coming from? It doesn't just magically appear.
Right, it doesn't. To understand where it's coming from, you got to look at what's happening globally. So let's start with China. They're on this big push to boost domestic consumption, fuel their economic growth.
Right.
And how are they going to do that?
How?
By injecting tons of cash into their economy.
Classic stimulus move. Pump money in, get people spending. But China's not exactly known for being hands-off.
No, they are not.
Could this impact Bitcoin in other ways?
It's a good point. China's actions always have ripple effects throughout the global economy, and their approach to Bitcoin is complex, it's evolving. But China is just one piece of this puzzle.
Okay, so who else is adding fuel to this fire?
Well, look at Germany. They're planning a huge spending spree, mainly on reindustrialization, beefing up their military, billions, maybe trillions of euros hitting the system.
Wow.
And it's not just Germany. Poland's doing the same thing with their military spending.
Okay, hold on. So we've got these major economies pumping massive amounts of money into the global system. What does that mean for Bitcoin? This is all good news.
It definitely adds fuel to the fire. And here's why it matters for Bitcoin. When you have rising global liquidity and a ton of geopolitical uncertainty, trade wars, shifting alliances, military buildups, Bitcoin starts to look really attractive as a safe haven.
Like digital gold.
Exactly. When things get shaky, people flock to it. And we're seeing that happen right now in the Bitcoin market. The amount of Bitcoin held on exchanges is steadily dropping, which suggests that, the big players, they're holding on for the long haul. They're not selling, they're dealing.
They're dealing. Okay, so the big players are betting on Bitcoin's future. That's a strong signal, right? But is it just a few whales, or is this like a broader trend?
It's more than just whales. It's estimated that something like 1,600 Bitcoin are being withdrawn from exchanges every single day.
Every day.
Every single day. To put that in perspective, that's 3.5 times the daily issuance of new Bitcoin.
So demand's outstripping supply. That sounds like, a recipe for a price surge. But there's got to be more to it, right? We're not just talking about market mechanics. This is geopolitical too.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a big development, one that could really shake things up, the White House Crypto Summit.
Ooh, a crypto summit at the White House. That's big.
It is. There's a lot of buzz about this and a lot of speculation. A lot of people are hoping for some major announcements on the U.S. government's stance on Bitcoin.
Okay, but like what? What are people expecting?
Well, there's a lot of mystery, but one of the most interesting rumors is the possibility of a Bitcoin strategic reserve.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. A Bitcoin strategic reserve.
Imagine a national stockpile of Bitcoin, just like countries hold gold reserves.
That's a bold move. Who's pushing for this?
Well, some major figures in the Bitcoin world, like Michael Saylor, Howard Lutnick, they're both expected at the summit. And they're both strong Bitcoin advocates.
Okay, so we've got global liquidity flooding the system, big players are hoarding Bitcoin, and now maybe even the U.S. government getting into the game. Things are heating up.
Yeah, they are.
But is this all just hype? Or is there real substance to this Bitcoin surge?
Well, look at what's happening with institutions. MicroStrategy, a company that has gone all in on Bitcoin, they're dominating the convertible bond market right now. 30% of all U.S. convertible bond issuance this year, it's related to Bitcoin. And MicroStrategy's leading the charge.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is. That's a strong signal, right? But what about other governments? Are any other countries embracing Bitcoin?
Oh, absolutely. El Salvador, for example, they're still buying Bitcoin.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Despite pressure from the IMF, they're pushing forward with their Bitcoin strategy, and it's a really good example of this growing trend of sovereign adoption.
El Salvador, the Bitcoin nation, they're not backing down. But are any other countries following their lead?
Texas is looking at creating a Texas Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, which just reinforces their pro-Bitcoin stance. And it's not just the U.S. South Korea is reviewing Bitcoin ETFs. Belarus is using their excess energy for Bitcoin mining. More and more countries are joining in. It's becoming a global phenomenon.
It's like a digital gold rush, with everyone scrambling to get their piece of the Bitcoin pie.
It is.
But is all this activity just about money and power? Or is there something deeper going on?
Well, here's something to think about. A recent study found that cryptocurrency adoption has absolutely skyrocketed, reaching 10% of the world's population.
10% already. That's huge. But what does that really tell us? Is this just a fad? Or are we seeing like a fundamental shift in how people see money?
That 10% mark, it's significant. It often signals the start of what they call the S-curve adoption phase.
The S-curve.
This is where things really start to take off. We could be on the edge of a global breakout for cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin's leading the way.
So all signs point to a Bitcoin boom.
You've got this convergence of global liquidity, geopolitical shifts, and institutions getting involved. It's creating a very powerful force that's driving demand for Bitcoin. And we're still so early in this. Think about the potential as that 10% adoption rate just keeps growing.
This is where I get excited. We're not just talking about, investment returns. We're witnessing a potential financial revolution happening right in front of us.
It's an incredible time to be alive, that's for sure.
It is. It's fascinating. But the big question is, what role will Bitcoin play in the future of finance? And are you prepared?
That's the question, isn't it?
That's the question. And we'll be diving deeper into that in the next part of our Bitcoin deep dive.
It is a question that a lot of people are asking themselves these days. We're seeing all these macro trends converging, governments printing money like crazy, tons of geopolitical uncertainty, and institutions just piling into Bitcoin. It's a lot to take in.
It is. It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. Like, what does this mean for the average person out there who's hearing all this Bitcoin talk and thinking, should I get in on this?
Well, you always have to remember, Bitcoin's still relatively new, right? I mean, we're in the early stages of this. We are seeing adoption accelerating really fast, but it's not about just blindly jumping in, It's about doing your own research, understanding the risks, understanding the potential rewards, and deciding, does this fit with my financial goals?
Yeah, do your own research. Always rule number one in this space.
Yeah.
But let's talk more about this Bitcoin strategic reserve idea.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it sounds like something out of like a spy movie.
It does have a certain mystique to it, doesn't it? But the concept itself, it's pretty straightforward. It's basically a government holding a stockpile of Bitcoin, kind of like how countries hold gold reserves.
So why would a country want to do that? What's the strategic advantage of holding Bitcoin along with their gold?
Well, there are a few potential reasons. One, it could be a hedge against inflation. Remember, Bitcoin's supply is capped, 21 million coins. So it's often seen as deflationary, unlike fiat currencies that governments can print endlessly.
Right, right. So unlike that bottomless pit of dollars, euros, yen, Bitcoin is limited. But wouldn't a country need like massive computing power to mine enough Bitcoin for a strategic reserve?
Not necessarily. They could just buy it on the open market like El Salvador's been doing. Remember, they've been steadily buying Bitcoin, despite that pushback from the IMF.
It's pretty wild to see El Salvador leading the charge like that. But let's go back to those strategic advantages. What else makes a Bitcoin reserve appealing to countries?
Another potential advantage. Think about increased financial independence. Imagine a world where nations rely less on the US dollar or other major currencies for trade, for finance. Bitcoin could be a way to diversify their reserves and reduce that reliance on one single dominant currency.
Yeah, that would definitely shake things up globally. It's like creating this parallel financial system.
In a way, it is. And then lastly, a Bitcoin reserve could really position a country as a leader in this whole digital asset space, attract investment, foster innovation in blockchain technology. It's about staying ahead of the curve in this rapidly changing world of finance.
So it's not just about financial security, it's about positioning yourself for the future. It's like a high-stakes game of chess with everyone trying to secure their spot in this new financial order.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just about national reserves either. Remember MicroStrategy. They converted a big chunk of their corporate treasury to Bitcoin. That's a bold statement. That's them saying, we believe in Bitcoin for the long term.
It's like saying, we're betting on Bitcoin more than we are on the dollar. But I have to ask, what about the elephant in the room? The environmental impact of Bitcoin. We hear a lot about the energy consumption of mining. How do we reconcile that with this idea of Bitcoin being a responsible investment?
It's an important question. And yeah, it's important to acknowledge that Bitcoin mining uses a lot of energy, but the story's changing. More and more miners are using renewables, hydropower, solar, wind. So the energy mix is becoming greener.
So it's not inherently bad for the environment. It's more about where that energy comes from.
Exactly. And there's another angle here. Bitcoin mining can actually incentivize the development of new, more efficient energy sources. Miners are constantly looking for the cheapest, the most reliable energy, and that drives innovation in the renewable energy sector.
So Bitcoin could actually help lead to a cleaner energy future. That's not something you hear very often.
It's a perspective worth considering. Plus, we need to put Bitcoin's energy use in context. How does it compare to the energy use of, say, traditional banking or gold mining? The picture gets a lot more nuanced when you look at the full scope of things.
Right, it's all about context. You can't just look at Bitcoin in isolation. But even with all that, shouldn't the Bitcoin community still be making sustainability a top priority?
Absolutely. Addressing environmental concerns, working towards making mining as sustainable as possible, it's crucial for the Bitcoin community. And the good news is, there are some really brilliant people out there who are dedicated to finding solutions, making mining more energy efficient and more environmentally friendly.
That's good to hear. Sounds like there's a real effort to make Bitcoin more sustainable. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about Bitcoin adoption around the world. That study we talked about showing 10% global crypto ownership, that was mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is a remarkable number, and it gets even more interesting when you break it down. That 10% includes all kinds of cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin is still the dominant player.
So even with all these new cryptos popping up, Bitcoin's still the king.
It is. It's still the most recognized, most widely held cryptocurrency globally.
Yeah.
Something like 450 million people own it. That first mover advantage, the brand recognition, the limited supply, it all makes it a very compelling investment.
It's like the gold standard of the digital world. But 10% adoption, is that a tipping point? Are we entering this new era where Bitcoin becomes mainstream?
Well, that 10% mark is often seen as a key threshold. It means we're moving beyond those early adopters into a phase of rapid, widespread adoption. We could be on the verge of a major shift in how people around the world think about money and how they use it.
It's pretty exciting to think about all of possibilities, but is this truly global or is it concentrated in certain parts of the world?
It's happening everywhere. In developed countries, developing countries, we're seeing adoption accelerate in the US, Europe, Africa, Asia. It's a global movement.
So Bitcoin is living up to its name. It's a global currency. But what's driving this widespread adoption? Is it all about the potential to make money, or is there something more to it?
It's a mix of things. For some, yeah, it's about the potential for profit. But for many, especially in places with economic instability or where it's hard to access traditional banking, Bitcoin offers something more. It offers financial freedom.
Financial freedom, that's powerful. What does that look like in practice? How is Bitcoin empowering people around the world?
Well, Bitcoin's decentralized, right? Borderless transactions, resistance to censorship. It's a powerful tool for people who are looking for more control over their finances. Imagine being able to send money across borders instantly with low fees, or having a store of value that's not subject to the whims of governments or banks.
It's like a financial equalizer, giving people more autonomy. It's empowering individuals in a way that traditional finance just doesn't.
Exactly. And as adoption grows, we can expect to see even more innovative applications of Bitcoin, streamlining remittances, making micropayments easier, facilitating cross-border trade, promoting financial inclusion.
So we're not just talking about investment returns. This is a potential paradigm shift in how we think about how we interact with money. It's about empowering individuals. It's about fostering innovation, building a more inclusive financial system.
It's about rewriting the rules of finance. It's about creating a future where everyone has the tools and the opportunities to achieve financial well-being.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Global liquidity, government strategies, institutional adoption, the environmental questions, global adoption trends. It's been quite a journey. But before we wrap up, I got to ask, what about the skeptics, the people who say Bitcoin's a bubble, it's a fad, it's a scam?
Well, skepticism's natural, right? Especially when you're talking about something as disruptive and paradigm shifting as Bitcoin. I mean, every major technological innovation's had its doubters.
So how do we address those concerns? How do we bridge that gap between the Bitcoin believers and the skeptics?
It starts with education. We need to demystify the technology, make it accessible to everyone. People need to understand what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. The more people understand, the more they'll see the potential.
Knowledge is power. But is it just about understanding the technical stuff, or is there more to it than that?
It's about connecting the dots, right? Between the technology and its real-world applications. It's not enough to just talk about Bitcoin as some theoretical store of value or a hedge against inflation. We have to show how people are using it today to solve real problems.
Give me some examples. How are people actually using Bitcoin in their everyday lives?
We're seeing it used for cross-border payments, remittances, microtransactions, even online shopping. And as more people use it, we can expect to see even more innovative applications popping up, which just further solidifies its utility and its value.
So it's not just a speculative asset. It's a practical tool that's making a difference in people's lives right now. But what about the volatility? I mean, Bitcoin's price swings, they can be wild. Doesn't that scare people off?
Volatility is part of any new market, especially one as disruptive as Bitcoin. But as the market matures, we can expect those swings to smooth out a bit.
So it's just a matter of time before Bitcoin becomes more stable.
As more institutional investors get involved, as regulations become clearer, as adoption continues to grow, yeah, I think we can expect to see Bitcoin's price stabilize over time.
So less roller coaster, more like a steady climb. That sounds a lot better to the average investor.
Exactly. But even with the volatility, it's important to remember, Bitcoin has consistently outperformed most traditional assets over the long term. So it's about having that long-term mindset, focus on the fundamentals, don't get caught up in the day-to-day price swings.
It's like that saying, time in the market beats timing the market. But let's look ahead. What are some of the key trends you're watching in this space that could shape Bitcoin's future?
One of the most exciting things is the emergence of these Layer 2 solutions, things like the Lightning Network. This is technology designed to make Bitcoin transactions faster, cheaper, more scalable. And that paves the way for much greater adoption.
So it's about making Bitcoin more user-friendly, more accessible to everyone. But what about its relationship with the traditional financial system? Will they coexist? Or are we heading for some kind of showdown?
Well, another trend I'm watching is the growing integration of Bitcoin with traditional finance. More and more financial institutions are starting to offer Bitcoin-related services, custody, trading, lending, payments.
So maybe it's not a battle. Maybe it's more of a convergence of these two worlds. What does that mean for the future of money?
It's still early, and it's really impossible to predict for sure. But one thing's clear. Bitcoin is a force to be reckoned with. It's challenging the old ideas of money, of finance, of power.
It's like Bitcoin is this catalyst, sparking a global conversation about the nature of money itself and its role in our lives.
It's forcing us to rethink those assumptions we've held for so long. Who controls money? How is value created? What does it mean to have financial sovereignty? These are fundamental questions that Bitcoin is bringing to the forefront.
It's pretty amazing to be witnessing this paradigm shift happening right now. But with any revolution, there are going to be some bumps in the road.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that Bitcoin needs to overcome to really become mainstream?
Scalability, that's a big one. The Bitcoin network can only handle a limited number of transactions per second right now, and that can lead to delays, higher fees when demand's high. But there are brilliant developers working on solutions to improve this, like that Lightning Network we talked about.
So it's a work in progress, but there's a plan to address it. But technology is only one piece of the puzzle, right? What about regulations? Governments and central banks, they're not exactly known for being, comfortable with things that threaten their control over the financial system.
Regulation's another crucial piece. Clear and consistent regulations, those are essential for fostering innovation and adoption. And we are seeing progress. Governments around the world are starting to figure out how to regulate cryptocurrencies effectively.
It's a tough balance. They need to minimize the risks without stifling the innovation.
Oh.
But let's switch gears for a second and talk about the human side of this. We've talked tech, economics, geopolitics. What about the people behind Bitcoin? What are their motivations? What are they hoping for?
That's what makes this space so interesting. It's not just numbers and code, it's about people. There's this vibrant, passionate community of developers, entrepreneurs, investors, everyday users, who believe in the power of Bitcoin to change the world.
It's a movement driven by this shared vision of a more open, accessible, and equitable financial system.
A system that empowers individuals, breaks down those barriers, fosters innovation. It's a vision that resonates with people from all over, from all walks of life, tech enthusiasts, social activists, libertarians, humanitarians.
It's like a beautiful tapestry of perspectives, all united by this belief in the transformative potential of Bitcoin. But as with any movement, there are going to be different voices, different opinions, different ways of doing things. How do we navigate those differences and find common ground?
Open dialogue, respectful debate, and a willingness to listen and learn from each other. Those are essential. The Bitcoin community is diverse, and it's by embracing that diversity that we can unlock its full potential. It's about finding unity in our shared values while acknowledging and respecting those differences.
It's about building bridges, not walls. It's about collaboration, not competition. Recognizing that we're all in this together, all working towards a common goal.
That's the spirit of Bitcoin. Decentralization, collaboration, empowerment. Creating a future where everybody has a voice and the opportunity to participate in a more just, equitable financial system.
That's an inspiring vision. Okay, we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. The technical side, the economics, the geopolitical stuff, the risks, the challenges, and the inspiring stories of people who are shaping Bitcoin's future. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding now.
It's been great exploring this with you. And, remember, this is just the beginning. Bitcoin's story is still being written, and it's up to all of us to decide how we want to be a part of it.
So what's the best way for our listeners to stay informed and engaged in this rapidly changing space? What resources would you recommend?
There are so many great resources online. News websites, blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels. It's important to be discerning, look for reputable sources, and don't be afraid to ask questions, engage in the discussions, connect with other people who are passionate about Bitcoin. This is a community-driven movement. The more we learn and share together, the stronger it will be.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our Bitcoin deep dive. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to like, comment, share this episode with your friends, and be sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more fascinating explorations. We'll see you next time. That is the million-dollar question, right? I mean, we've talked about all the potential upsides of financial freedom, the innovation, a more inclusive system, but what about the other side? What are the risks? What do we need to be aware of?
It's a good point. It's always important to have a balanced perspective. Bitcoin, like anything powerful, can be used for good, can be used for bad. One of the concerns you hear a lot is about its potential use in, illicit activities.
Hmm.
Because transactions are pseudonymous, they're hard to trace, Bitcoin's sometimes linked to money laundering, things like that.
That's a fair concern. But isn't that true of any currency, even cash? I mean, criminals have always found ways to exploit financial systems.
That's true. It's true. It's important to remember that Bitcoin's just a tool, right? And how it's used, well, that depends on the intentions of the people using it. Law enforcement, they're getting a lot more sophisticated at tracking Bitcoin transactions these days. And the blockchain itself, it actually provides a permanent and transparent record. That can be really useful in investigations.
So it's not foolproof, but there are some safeguards. But what about the risks for, everyday investors? We talked about the volatility, but are there other things they should watch out for?
Yeah, investors definitely need to understand the risks. Bitcoin's a relatively new asset class. Its price, well, it can be affected by a lot of things, regulations changing, tech developments, market sentiment. It's not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not a set it and forget it investment.
Yeah.
But if we zoom out, look at the big picture, where do you see Bitcoin fitting in the future of finance? Is it going to be a niche thing, or is it going to disrupt the whole system?
The big question, right? The million-dollar question. Impossible to predict the future, of course, but one thing is clear. Bitcoin's a force to be reckoned with. It's challenging those traditional ideas of money, finance, power.
It's like a catalyst, sparking a global conversation about what money is, how it should work.
It's making us rethink assumptions we've held for a long time. Who controls the money? How is value created? What does it mean to have financial sovereignty? Bitcoin's bringing these questions front and center.
It is a fascinating time to be alive, witnessing this shift. But like any revolution, there are going to be challenges. What are some of the things that Bitcoin needs to overcome to really, truly go mainstream?
Scalability is a big one. The Bitcoin network, it can only handle a certain number of transactions per second right now, and that can lead to delays, higher fees, especially when there's a lot of demand. But there are some incredibly talented developers working on this, on solutions to improve scalability, like the Lightning Network. We talked about that.
So it's a work in progress, but there's a plan. But technology, that's only part of it. What about the whole regulatory landscape? Governments, central banks, they tend to be pretty wary of anything that could threaten their control over the financial system.
Regulations, that's another key piece. Clear, consistent regulations. That's what we need to foster innovation, to see more adoption. And we are seeing some progress. I mean, governments around the world are starting to figure out how to regulate cryptocurrencies effectively.
It's a delicate balance, right? Trying to manage the risks without stifling the innovation.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the human element of all of this. We've talked tech, economics, geopolitics.
Yeah.
But what about the people behind Bitcoin? What drives them? What are their hopes for the future?
That's what makes this space so fascinating to me. It's not just about numbers and code, it's about people. There's this really vibrant and passionate community, developers, entrepreneurs, investors, everyday users who really believe that Bitcoin can change the world.
It is a movement, driven by a shared vision of a more open, a more accessible, a more equitable financial system.
A system that empowers individuals, breaks down barriers, fosters innovation, and it's a vision that connects with people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, tech enthusiasts, social activists, libertarians, humanitarians, you name it.
It's amazing it's this tapestry of different perspectives, and yet they're all united by this belief in Bitcoin's potential to change things. But as with any movement, you're going to have different voices, different opinions, different approaches. How do we make sense of those differences, and how do we find common ground?
Open dialogue, respectful debate, and a willingness to listen, to learn from each other, that's essential. The Bitcoin community is diverse, and it's through embracing that diversity that we unlock its full potential. It's about finding that unity and shared values, even as we acknowledge and respect our differences.
It's about building bridges, right? Not walls. It's about collaboration over competition. It's recognizing that we're all in this together, working towards that shared goal.
That's the spirit of Bitcoin. Decentralization, collaboration, empowerment. It's about creating a future where everyone has a voice and everyone has the opportunity to participate in a fairer, more equitable financial system.
It's an inspiring vision. Wow. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. The technical aspects, the economics, the geopolitical side, the risks, the challenges, the inspiring stories of the people who are really shaping Bitcoin's future. I feel like I've learned so much.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. And remember, this is just the beginning. The Bitcoin story is still being written, and it's up to all of us to decide how we want to be a part of it.
So for our listeners who want to stay informed, who want to get involved in this rapidly evolving world, what are the best ways to do that? What resources would you recommend?
There are tons of great resources out there online, news websites, blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels. It's important to be discerning, look for those reputable sources. Don't be afraid to ask questions, engage in discussions, connect with people who are passionate about Bitcoin. This is a community-driven movement. The more we learn together, the more we share together, the stronger we become.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our Bitcoin deep dive. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this episode with your friends. Be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more fascinating explorations of the world around us. Until next time.